Hello, it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to do my June reading and comics wrap-up because, once again, I only managed to read one single manga volume in the month of June, so I'm just going to combine the two reading wrap-ups for this month. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting with the manga I read this month, which was Wotakoi by Fujita, or Love is Hard for Otaku, and I quite enjoyed this. It has a very crisp art style, very moderate use of textures and tones, which enhances the art and does not make it too cluttered and stuffy. The artist knows how to do expressions really well. They know how to manage the space the characters are in, and it just feels, the art feels very flowy and balanced, and I like that. I especially like the way Fujita does expressions. The characters feel like people, they don't feel like puppets, like is the case sometimes with a lot of manga. And I also really related to the story. This is basically about two childhood friends who are both geeks, and they decide to start dating because they have a lot in common, and it is about these relationships that these characters have and their friendships. And it is all about celebrating geek culture and celebrating fandom. And there are a lot of visual gags, like anime references, game references, and cosplay references, which I really enjoyed. I will say that this manga is, in my opinion, not for beginners. If you are not familiar with Japanese dating culture, if you are not familiar with Japanese pop culture or Japanese office culture, some of these jokes will not be funny to you because they rely a lot on you knowing these things. Also, the first couple of chapters are a little bit slow and didn't really grab my attention too much, but once all the major players are introduced, then the jokes and the funny elements really start to hit it off, and I enjoyed that. So really looking forward to picking up the next volume in the series, and I gave Wotakoi Volume 1 3.5 stars. Then I read Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. This is the conclusion to Monsters of Verity duology, and it was a bit of a mixed bag. Overall, I quite liked it. I liked the conclusion. I liked how the story ended. But I also felt that the pacing was a bit off. There was an overabundance of villainous characters, which meant that we were not focusing too much on a single villain. Also, there was a lot of redundancy. The characters, point of view characters, August and Kate, kept backtracking and circulating same thoughts over and over again, which I think was a little bit redundant, and that page amount could have been used to exploring the world and side characters a bit more. A lot of the side characters, namely Soro and Ilsa, felt a little underutilized in my opinion. But the ending was so good that I think that it managed to redeem the book for me a bit. So I ended up giving Our Dark Duet 3.5 stars as well. It wasn't as good or as enjoyable as This Savage Song was, but I still think that it was a pretty good conclusion to the duology. And then I read The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden, and I really liked it. It was twisty and dark and whimsical. I liked Vasya's character. She was very well developed. She felt like a real person. She had her faults, she had flaws, but she was very resilient and resourceful, and I liked how she interacted with the other characters, and I just felt that the story felt like an actual fairy tale, which was what it was going for, and I really liked that. The things I didn't like was that if I started thinking about the side characters, I don't think they could have stood on their own, because they all used Vasia's character as the driving force, so they weren't as fully realized as characters by themselves, but I still really enjoyed them and their interactions with Vasia. I really loved the themes the book was exploring, religion and kind of development of religion from the old ways to new faiths. I also liked the exploration of zealotry in the character of Father Constantine. And it was just a really fun ride. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. It was just a fun ride, and I will really be looking forward to reading the next part in the story. I gave Bear and the Nightingale 4 stars. Then I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This was the June pick for the BookTube Discord server book club, and I highly enjoyed this. I loved that it was character driven. I loved the sciencey bits. They felt very plausible and easy to follow, but not too simplistic as not to tickle the logic brain of those who are more versed in science fiction, in my opinion. And I just loved the exploration of different species and humans' relations to them. And the core character group of the Wayfarer crew was such a delight to follow. I liked that they had their differences. They each were their own characters and their own people. And they had different ways of communicating with each other. And some of them were better friends than others. I really enjoyed that. And it really was an exploration of a long-ass space travel, which I really enjoyed. What to say about it? It just was a thought-provoking and fully realized character drama. I really loved that about it. I will say that there were a couple instances with a couple characters whose storylines were not as fully realized as some of the others. They were not given enough page time, and the end resolutions to both of them, in my opinion, were a little bit cheap and took the easy way out, which was why I didn't give this 5 stars. But all in all, really enjoyed this, would highly recommend, and it is one of my favorite books of the year so far. And I'm really happy to be continuing on in the series, so I gave this one 4.5 stars. And finally, the last book I read in June was Maresi by Maria Turtschaninoff. And I wanted to read this because Maria Turtschaninoff is going to be a guest of honor in FinCon, which is going to be held next weekend. And I'm going to be going there, and I wanted to have some knowledge of the works the guest of honors have put out. So that's why I wanted to read Maresi. And this is a book that's narrated by Maresi, the titular character, and it tells about an event that happens in the Red Abbey when men come to the island to retrieve a girl who has sought solace in there and sought sanctuary in there. And the Red Abbey is an abbey that's on an island where no men are allowed to land, and it is a place full of women. And this book was a celebration of femininity, a celebration of womanhood, and a lot of the world building relies on this kind of female magic and that kind of mythos. And I love the world building. The world building was the best part, in my opinion, about this book. I will say that it was crammed full of characters that did not really get enough page time to be fully realized as characters. I will say that I think only 2 characters, Maresi and Yai, who is the girl who these men come to get, those are the only 2 characters who are like fully realized living, breathing souls, in my opinion. But I enjoyed the world building. I will say the first half of the book is really slow. It picks up on the second half, and I think the second half was a lot stronger. That's where all the action happens, and that's where all this kind of magic happens, and you really get a sense of the feminine powers at play, and I love that. My biggest gripe with this book was the translation. I feel like I will have to go and read the original Swedish language text, because the Finnish translation cut some corners. It used some words that were too modern for this book and should not have been there, and that kind of broke my immersion a bit. So I will be looking forward to reading the Swedish version at some point. If you have read any version of Maresi, I know there's an English translation out and a French translation. If you have read any version of Maresi, how did you think that the language flowed? Because I think that since it is written originally in Swedish, which is a Germanic language, the flow is a lot different than it is in Finnish, which is on a completely different language family. So I would like to know, if you have read this in some other language, how did you feel about it? Did you think the language was good? But yeah, I ended up giving Maresi 3 stars. It was okay. I don't have too many bad things to say about it, except that the translation was a bit eh. But yeah, I would recommend it if you like kind of feminist fairy tales with a hint of legend. I would recommend it. I will say that Maresi herself is not the most interesting character. The world is what makes this story. But yeah, 3 stars to Maresi. And there you have it. This has been my June wrap-up. Tell me in the comments if you are interested in any of these books, or if you have read any of them. I would be interested to know your thoughts. And if you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. And I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!